Are you ready to unlock the secrets of brand innovation? Here you'll discover unexpected ways to make your brand soar in value. Get ready for inspiring stories, actionable tips, and insights you'll need to build your brand and learn an entirely new way to fly. This is the Hummingbird Effect. And now your host, Wendy Coulter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Coulter, and I help CEOs and marketing leaders unlock the hidden power of their brands. For years, business leaders have focused on marketing tactics, getting things done. But what truly matters is building a strong brand that resonates. Have you ever experienced a hummingbird effect? Like the co-evolution of a hummingbird and the flower, this is when small innovations in branding or marketing can lead to really unexpected results in other areas of the business, such as increased valuation, a change in culture, an operational breakthrough, or even a new product development. I'm excited to be here today. I've got Hanna with me as usual. Hanna Jernigan is our marketing strategist at Hummingbird. Welcome to the show, Hanna. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Wendy. I'm really excited to talk with our guest today. He's just a delightful treat to be talking to, so I'm excited.
Well, I am too. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the world of brand building. And I'm thrilled to have with us Gee Ranasinha, CEO of Kexino. I've been reading up on you, Gee. Very honored to have you on the show. You've got a background both as a professor and a agency owner, which I truly admire. But I found a fun fact about Gee, and that is that he's a recovering perfectionist. So he can join my world because I used to vacuum the house every single day, and was quite a perfectionist. But I think being an agency owner kind of changes that about us, because everything can't be perfect. And I think sometimes the things we find in between the perfection are the little gems that help move everything forward. And so that's just a fun fact. And then something else I found as I was researching Gee that I found really super interesting, and I hope he's going to cover it a little bit on the show today, is he says that your biggest source of revenue is the customer that you didn't know existed. And I find that really interesting. And I see that with our clients sometimes when they kind of find that nugget of what differentiates them and they realize what that changes about the customer that they've been looking for and that's been coming into their world and can open that up. So, Gee, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today. We're going to talk about how seemingly small innovations can lead to big wins. And I'd love to hear more about you for the listeners. Please share your story a little bit here.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. Firstly, thank you very much for the invite. Delighted to be invited. So yes, I'm Gee Ranasinha. I run Kexino, as you mentioned. We're a team of marketing, creative, and business development specialists that help. We work with startups and small businesses to help produce, better and more relevant marketing. We combine strategy, branding, with behavioral science. So this is biopsychology, and we're doing this to increase awareness, reputation, trust. But most of all, it's about increasing sales, right? Because sales is what it's all about, right? That's what we're doing this all for, okay? It's not a charity we're running here. At the end of the day, it needs to generate sales. If your marketing doesn't generate sales, it's not marketing, it's fluff. So that's who we are. We've been going for 17 years. We're 19 people in 9 countries. 9 of us are in the US. The rest are in Europe, South Africa, Japan, and I have 2 people in Australia as well. We've been operating in a distributed working environment since day one, which, as you can cast your mind back to 17 years ago, was a pretty bold move in the agency space at the time. And even though our headquarters is in Europe, around 90% of our clients are from North America. Don't ask me why. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. But apparently, I don't know if you've heard of it, Wendy, there's this thing called the interwebs or something.
Oh,
and apparently they
Central Park?
fine you from this.
They
Yeah, I think it's
really?
like a Yellow Pages or something like that.
That's the second
You know?
time I talked about Yellow Pages in one day. That is
Oh,
too
is it
funny.
really?
It's
There you
like the
go.
Yellow
It was meant to
Pages.
be.
I think it's a little bit bigger than the Yellow Pages, but it
I
opens
don't
up.
know. I remember some of those Yellow Pages were really thick.
Brilliant. I love
Yeah.
it. Yes, but we are in a connected world now that is beyond the city that the Yellow Pages was for in the past.
Absolutely.
And so I
Yeah.
love that you bring that up. Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us about the neuroscience piece of this and what you're doing within the educational space to help marketers figure that piece out, because I think that's very, very interesting. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I think there's, if we look at the state of marketing today, okay, we've got all of this technology, customer audience profiles and remarketing tags and AI and all of this sort of stuff going on, okay? Yet if we actually look at the effectiveness of our marketing, it's actually falling,
Yes.
right? And if we ask the average person in the street, somebody who's not involved with marketing, I call them civilians, okay? If you ask a civilian, marketing has never been so hated, distrusted today than at any time in the past. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And I think that the reason is that most marketing today is using technology to hide behind the fact that many marketers, not all, maybe not even most, though the jury's still out on that one, but certainly a lot of marketing today is coming from a position of pragmatism and rationality. It's coming from a logical perspective that's been driven by software, technology. That it's a Newtonian physics model. 1 + 1 is always 2. Okay? Now, that works for other areas of the business. It certainly works in finance. It works in manufacturing, in R&D, in various other parts of the business. We know how each component part of a system operates in isolation and how it contributes to the efficacy of the system as a whole. And so if we want to increase the performance, the efficiency of the system, we know that increasing the efficiency of smaller parts can have a positive effect on the entire system. But the problem is that whole argument falls down pretty quickly when we deal with marketing, because in marketing we're not dealing with manufacturing, we're not dealing with R&D. If we're in manufacturing, right, supposing we're a company and we make widgets, okay? Now, if we want to increase the efficiency of that widget making system, okay, there are various things we could do. We could buy a better widget making machine that runs quicker, right? We could buy our raw materials from a different source where the pricing is lower. We could reduce the salaries we're paying our workers to run the widget making machine. There's lots of things we can do, okay? And there is a direct line of causality between what we do and what we result with. What's the resulting effect? The issue with marketing is that we're not dealing with known quantities that do not vary. We're dealing with people. And people are anything but logical, rational, and pragmatic in the way they choose to buy stuff. Okay? We change our minds. The decisions that we make as buyers is heavily influenced by context and emotion. And this is where the whole thing breaks down in trying to create, we're trying to we're trying to make marketing into the wrong kind of science. We're trying to make it infinitely repeatable, regardless of context. But that's not how human beings work, okay? Many of the levers that we can pull that influence a buying decision are not logical or rational in their source. And not only that, they change with context. For example, if we go back to the Newtonian physics model of the business world, right? We have units of measurement which are easily quantifiable and communicable across different disciplines, right? A kilogram is always a kilogram, okay? A mile is always a mile, okay? 212 degrees Fahrenheit is always 212 degrees Fahrenheit. These are easily communicable units of measurement, okay? But if we look at some of the levers that we can pull for a customer that influences their buying decision, they are things like fear, anger, regret, right? I mean, you think about it, the entire insurance industry is built on fear. Okay, so how do you quantify that? How do you measure that? How can you form some kind of attributable information if you're talking about emotions? Also, we change our minds. We think about things in one way when we have a certain amount of information or in a certain frame of mind, but we can quite easily change our point of reference with new information, or just simply because we're in a different mood, okay?
Right.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've come back on a Friday evening, maybe having one too many glasses of the falling down water, right? And hit Amazon and bought some utter crap that turns up like the next day. It's like, oh yeah, that wasn't a dream. I did actually buy that left-handed screwdriver, or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to buy a purple hat yesterday, and Hannah talked me into a pint glass. I don't know. It's very
There you
interesting.
go.
We make those decisions, right?
We make those decisions and we make them emotionally. And the thing is that that's the way we as buyers buy. And that's how we buy anything. Okay? I don't care what you're selling, to whom you're selling it to, whether it's B2B, whether it's B2C, okay? We buy from here. We buy from the heart. We buy emotionally. Anything that we buy emotionally. And then, after the fact, we post-rationalize logically. We tell ourselves a story. We spin ourselves a yarn to justify that purchase in our heads, right? So I'm walking down the high street. I pass a shoe store. I see a pair of shoes in the window. I go, oh my goodness me, they're an amazing pair of shoes. I've got to see if they've got in my size. So I go in and I try the shoes on, and they're awesome. They're absolutely brilliant. Fantastic pair of shoes. So they box them up, they package them up, they swipe my credit card, I'm out the door, and I go home. In the comfort of my own home, I open the box and I take out these shoes and I look at the bill, and I don't know if the price or the serial number. It's just like, how much have I spent on a pair of freaking shoes? Right? All of a sudden you're going, oh my God, what have I done? Right? The cold light of day hits you straight between the eyes. So what happens then? What do? We tell ourselves a story. We try to justify it to ourselves, right? We look at the shoe and say, look, feel that leather. Oh my goodness me, it's as soft as a baby's tushy. It's wonderful. It's great. It's gonna look at the styling. It's so classic. It's gonna go with so many different things that I wear. Look how well made these things are. It's like hand stitched in Italy by 87-year-old grandfathers, right? skills have been passed down from men. All of that
These
stuff,
are the
right?
only pair of shoes I'm going to need for the rest of my life.
They're going to last so much longer than the other shoes. I'm actually saving myself money.
Right.
This is what we tell ourselves. And if we tell ourselves a convincing story, we keep the shoes. If we don't, we're down to get our money back. And that's the point. What's happened in marketing today is that we've forgotten that there's two halves of the whole. So too much of marketing today is logical and rational and pragmatic. It's basically a bunch of bullet points, right? I mean, you know this with your own clients, or with the competition of your clients, right? You could get two pieces of marketing side by side from companies in the same category but are competitors. And if you covered up the logo, the actual messaging could be interchangeable, right?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no differentiation. There's no distinction. They're saying the same crap as everybody else is saying, right? So how can you as a buyer make a measured and confident buying decision when you've got this sea of sameness? You're surrounded in a sea of greys, and there's nobody else who's out there who's standing out. There's nobody who's pulling on those emotional levers which drive buying behavior, right? And that's what I'm saying. We need to get the emotion back into our marketing if we've got any hope of standing out from the deluge of just crap that's being vomited out day in, day out, right? Especially with AI. I mean, this vibe marketing thing. Have you heard of this vibe marketing? Right?
Yeah.
Where you just throw a bunch of words at a bunch of AI and it'll vomit out like 500 ads with different creative, different headlines, different body copy that you then throw into the media platform of your choice, and the two ads which give you like 0.001% better uplift are considered to be the successful ones, and you double down on them, and that's called
Marketing.
That's called
Right.
vibe marketing. So the fact that out of those 500 ads, 498 ads have been crap and have just been annoying your ICP to the point where they're not going to make any differentiation to the one that's giving you this tiny little bit of increased effectiveness, doesn't seem to make any difference to people. We're exorcising creativity out of the equation because we don't know how to measure it and we don't know how to bill for it. Right? If you look at from a production standpoint, we'll forget strategic for a minute, but if we just look at it tactical, we know how much media costs, we know how much design costs, we know how much images, video, audio, whatever else, and we can budget for all of these sorts of things. And we know how much media costs, and we know what our CPC limits are. We know what our eyeball, the eyeball spread is going to be. But we don't know how to budget for creativity. We can't say, okay, let's put $2,300 worth of creativity into this campaign. Doesn't mean anything, does it?
What does that mean?
Okay.
Right. What does that mean?
There's no, we can't do that because
Right.
there is no, we can't quantify that resource in the same way. So what do? We don't do it.
We rationalize
We
that
just think
that's too much. Yeah.
we just instead of that we just think, okay, more is automatically better, so we'll just do more. Okay, so it's what I call pasta marketing, right? So
I think to
you
your
throw
point,
spaghetti.
though, G, I think that it gives good marketers who are interested in the creativity and differentiation, which is really what what you're talking about, a fantastic opportunity today to take that creativity, create something more emotional to speak to the target markets and make a difference and not be in that sea of sameness. And so I think what's amazing now is if you do differentiate, you can really stand out in a bigger way. Do you agree with me on that?
Up to a point. And I don't want to sort of keep on banging the drum like, and we're all doomed, the world is going to end, woe is me. And no, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. But the problem is, even if you have an enlightened, talented person in marketing, they've got to convince their boss. They've got to convince their client.
Right.
Right. And all the client sees are dollar signs. And all the client sees is, what? You mean I could do more for less? That's a win for me. Right? They're looking at efficiency and not effectiveness. Right? They're efficiency, which is how much more can I get for my buck? That's efficiency. Right? So whether it's actually effective is immaterial. We're focusing again on the wrong thing. Right? Far better to spend more on the campaign and have it generate the expectations, the commercial expectations expected of it, rather than blitz people with this generic vanilla crap that does nothing more than dilute the reputation of your brand by associating it with, visual music, just spam, just crap, just nonsense.
Hey listeners, if you're enjoying the Hummingbird Effect, there's a special treat just for you. The team has put together a free downloadable resource that maps out 20 reasons why having a branding strategy is essential for your business. It's packed with valuable insights that help you understand the power of effective branding. Don't miss out. Download it now by visiting the website hummingbird-creative.com or checking the link in the show notes.
So, Gee, when we're talking about outcomes, right, I think from where I've been as a marketer and the way that Hummingbird Effect came about is that there are other outcomes that can come from great marketing that can impact the business in other ways. And sales, certainly, we're always wanting to drive sales. I totally agree with that. But sometimes we've seen some really awesome outcomes in other areas of the business that also impact the success in other ways. So that could be a great creative idea that lends itself to a new product being developed. That might come from insight interviews with customers and understanding what they need and then move you towards something, or a culture change, right? Really understanding how culture needs to change. So as I transition us into a Hummingbird Effect and you think about that, can you share a specific instance where you saw a seemingly small change in marketing or branding that affected a positive outcome in the business that was unexpected, that wasn't really what you were necessarily looking for, but it made a tremendous difference in the business?
Absolutely. And I think what we can distill this down to is contrary thinking, okay? It's allowing us to solve these business problems in seemingly irrational ways. And we need to look at the irrational, the uncommon, the road less traveled, because if our solution space is filled with simple pragmatism and logic, then we're always going to come up with the same output, right?
Right.
Who was it who said, if you keep doing what you're doing, you keep getting what you're getting?
The same
Was
result.
it Stephen Covey
Over and
book?
over.
I think it was. Right.
Yeah.
So we need to encourage contrary thinking. We need to encourage experimentation. And that goes against the grain of this economic, physical mindset where we need to have, absolute attribution at a seemingly molecular level for everything that marketing does. And an example of, let's call it contrary thinking, was a client, a project that we had a few years ago now with a company in one of the southern states of the US, and they produced they're one of these meal box suppliers. You subscribe and you get a box of fresh ingredients delivered to your door with like a recipe card, and it's like in no more than 20 minutes you've got everything to make like a proper home cooked nutritious meal, and it's all there, right? So it's better than getting takeout, certainly cheaper than going to a restaurant and that sort of thing. And it is vaguely nutritious, and certainly more nutritious than going out and shoving a burger down your throat, right?
Right.
So these guys were doing really, really well. They'd grown very fast in a very short space of time. They were targeting their ICP was primarily early 20s to late 30s, couples or individuals, dinkies primarily. Dinky, you familiar with the term?
Oh, yeah.
Dinky, dual income, no kids. Okay, I wasn't sure. Didn't know if that would have made it across the pond. Okay, so they were doing really well, and they were using lots of different channels, lots of different media, and then got to a certain point that they were sort of hitting a bit of a ceiling sales-wise. Revenue-wise wasn't growing that much. Also, they wanted to get into older markets, older as in demographically older, age-wise. They were looking at perhaps like the newly single, okay, from divorcing or bereavement or whatever. And they'd done some research, and they thought that there was a market area for growth in that sector, but none of the stuff they were working seemed to generate very much of a success rate. We suggested for them to instead of, or as well as, using the digital channels that they were using, to use something which was, let's call it old-fashioned. Let's call it a little bit staid. And this was direct mail, printed direct mail, USPS direct mail, printing something out, sticking it on an envelope, and putting it in a postbox.
We can still do that in the world today, G, right?
Apparently, everywhere except Denmark. I don't know if you read that recently. Denmark is going to stop the collection and posting of letters. Parcels carry on, but letters will stop at the end of this year, because simply
there's not enough of it.
There's not enough people. But then also you look at USPS. Look at the prices now of USPS mailings.
Right.
And I think they're going up again the end of this month, and it's like 8% or 11% or something crazy.
But we wouldn't know because we've got the forever stamp. So we just go buy the forever stamp, and we don't even hear what the price of it is anymore, right?
And then we don't care, right? We don't look at that. But if you're a multi-locational warehouse sending out 500,000 mail drops a month,
right?
If your costs suddenly go up 8% overnight,
big difference.
That's a big difference, right? So anyway, I suggested snail mail, and the marketing director from the client, I think she's thought had just dropped out of the sky or something. Should think, what? US mail shots, right? It was just so far out of certainly her experience, okay? But just a range of ideas did not come even close to thinking in an analog world, okay? But I kept on her, and I kept going on at her about this. I said, trust me, we need to try this. Even if you turn round and you tell me, gee, see, you were full of shit, right? This has just been a total waste of time, money and effort, right? And she wasn't having any of it. And I just kept on. There were call after call. And eventually, to her credit, she acquiesced. And then she said, okay, let's do it in a very tight geographical area. We're going to target these zip codes. And we're going to do a control, because it's vital that you do a control. Okay? So we had another set of zip codes that we were measuring business from that weren't targeted, so we could see what the differences were. And we put something together, and the result was 34% uplift in that one campaign, over and above any single campaign in any medium, digital or otherwise, they had ever done in the history of their company. They repeated it again, and I've repeated it 3 times, I think, and they got double-digit growth each time. Right? And so the point is, if executed correctly, right? I'm not saying to everyone, all you need to do is scribble something down on a piece of 8.5 by 11, shove it in a padded envelope and throw it in the mailbox. That's not what I'm saying, right? The creative execution has to be there. The idea has to be there. The whole thing needs to hang together. There is work to be done, okay? And it has to make sense from the expectations of your ICP, of course, right? But that's the point. We need to pick the channel that's most apt for our buyer, not the other way round, right? If we're targeting 86-year-old retired pastors, right, TikTok is probably not the best channel to use, right?
Right.
No disrespect to all the 86-year-old retired pastors who are boogieing away on TikTok, right? If there are,
might
I
be
don't
a
care.
few of them. There might
There
be a few.
probably is, and I would hate to exclude them, right?
If not, it might be a
right.
very innovative idea, G.
If you want to go
them.
niche of a niche, then that's pretty darn niche of a niche, I think. But the point is, it didn't occur to them because it wasn't their experience, because they're coming at it from a digital first mindset.
Right.
And that's the issue. There's this thing called Maslow's hammer. It's also known as the law of the instrument. Most people know it as if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if all you're thinking about is how to solve a digital problem, then you're only ever going to come up with digital solutions. But the problem is never digital. The problem is behavioral, always, right? And especially right now, snail mail, direct mail has a huge advantage over many digital channels, okay? You're getting pretty much a guaranteed 100% open rate, okay? Because if I can guarantee you, Wendy, if I send you a bright blue envelope where it looks like it's been handwritten, addressed to you, you're going to open that envelope.
Absolutely.
Right? You are going to open that envelope. Right? Now, you might file it in the round circular filing cabinet straight afterwards,
yes,
right?
Right.
If it doesn't resonate. But just the same with any piece of collateral, right? It needs to be targeted. It needs to attract attention. There needs to be a communication. There needs to be all the usual stuff that we know for any other medium needs to be there, right? But direct mail hangs around. It's tactile, right? It tends to hang around. You put it on your desk, leave it. You come back to it, right? Also, there's this thing in behavioral psychology. Also, actually, it's something that we can look at from a more Darwinian aspect. From if we look at natural selection, which is a thing behavioral scientists call conspicuous consumption. Okay, well, costly signaling. What does that mean? The very fact that I've spent money communicating to you by printing out this piece of paper, putting it in an envelope, putting a stamp on it and throwing it in a mailbox, gives extra gravitas to the perception of the message that I'm sending you. Because you know, and it's cost me money to send it to you. There's effort involved, right? Which is missing from most digital channels, certainly email, right? You get an email,
Sure.
dear first name, because the substitution, the name substitution hasn't worked, right? You know, half the time we read the subject heading of the emails, we don't even open the rest of the mail, we just spin it, right? Because we know there's no cost to the marketer when they've sent that piece of communication, right? And even most digital channels, especially organic ones, you know, it's virtually free, right? But you know, if I'm trying to sell you a set of $1,000 steak knives, right? I could do, you know, 20 Instagram ads and put them everywhere, and YouTube pre-roll showing and all that sort of stuff, and you have one perception of the quality of those knives, right? But if I stick it on with a 48 sheet poster on your way to work with a picture of a celebrity chef saying these knives are absolutely friggin' awesome, right? That's creating a whole different perception of the quality of the product, right? Because there's costly signaling involved, right? The word costly signaling comes from the natural world because it's things like the peacock's tail, right? So the male peacock has this huge, big, ornate show of tail to signify to the females of the species that they are strong, they are virile, they would make good mating partners, right? For the rest of the time, it's a weight over there. It's a dead weight over these to care for this sort of stuff. Or even like flowers, okay? You think about how much energy is expended for a flower to create all these ornate petals and colors and all this stuff to attract bees, right? So that they can pollinate, right? So the bees come along, they see this flower, and they say, oh, there's loads of nectar in this flower. I'm going to remember this flower. The next time I come along, I know that this flower gives me loads of nectar, right? And the reason why these flowers do that is because they're offering a promise. They're offering a promise. Listen, Mr. Bee, Mrs. Bee. Well, no, Mrs. B is in the hive, right? It's only Mr. B who goes out. So listen, Mr. B, you can take comfort in the fact that when you see a flower that looks like this, you're on a certainty, right? You're going to get a good payoff, right? So it's worth the energy that the plant expends on creating this ornate flower and the perfume and the whole other stuff that goes along with that. Because it's creating this, if you like, buying trust for the bee to actually bother to come along. And this is the same thing that we're doing.
Well, I love that you've just described the actual hummingbird effect.
Right.
Using bees, but that's exactly what has happened with the hummingbird and the flower. And it's what we do as marketers as well when we're doing it the right way. I want to come around to the fact that you're talking about things that people today do not look at as innovations, but you're talking about them as innovations, right? And remembering these tools that can be used to reach a specific target market that we don't always remember exist. So I think that's pretty cool. I want to talk about innovation with you, and I want your opinion on how, because we are in this fast-paced environment and everybody is focused on digital because it's fast. They feel like they can get it out to more people with less effort and all of that. What is your advice, though, on how companies can still stay nimble and adaptable and capitalize on these types of ideas? And I want to go back to what you said at the beginning about getting the buy-in from someone else within the company to take a chance on something like this, what is your advice when you're working with a director of marketing and they've got to go to the top and get the buy-in on this? And I know you said, like, I kept on her, and I kept telling her she needed to do this. But what would be your advice to a marketing director who has an innovative idea that could create great results with a new target market or going in a different direction, to be able to get that buy-in that they need? Because I think that is a tremendous roadblock for marketers today.
I think the issue is one of communication. I think there seems to be a basic communication disconnect between the marketing department and pretty much every other department of the business, if you'll be totally honest. But certainly the C-suite, and especially the finance department. And I think this is fundamentally due to the different goals that each department has. But more than that, I think it's a question of language. It's the language that we as marketers use when we're talking to civilians, right? We forget that people who are not in our little world don't know things like excess share of voice or salience or distinctive brand assets, or all of the terminology and jargon that we love to use and bandy around within our own little clique, okay? Civilians don't know that stuff. And they don't want to know that stuff. And to be honest, especially when you get to the C-suite, it scares them shitless, right? Because we're talking about things which have no direct correlation to anything that's logic, factual based, right? When we talk about brand awareness and customer fidelity, and we're talking about these things as like wind through the fingers, tie dye, go up a mountain, retreat, sit under a pyramid and start chanting and worship the power of the crystal, right? I mean, it just sounds all sort of weird and wonderful, crazy shit, right? And that's our fault, right? Because I think there's two things. There's always a conflict between marketing and finance, okay? Even if they're both trying to do similar things, they just come across to do them typically in different ways, okay? But at the end of the day, the language of the business is the language of finance, okay? And it's based upon the underlying strategic goals and measurements set out by the CEO, okay? Part of the job of the CFO is to communicate that information in strictly business terms, right? So this is where you hear things like balance sheets, P&Ls, ROI, cash flow, EBITDA, right? Now, marketers can spell EBITDA, let alone tell you what it was, right? We don't talk board, right? We don't talk C-suite, okay? Our message to those C-suite, the stakeholders, should be seen as equally important. But since we use a different set of language terms that's unique to us, most of what we say just flies over the heads of most of the economics, finance-driven people.
Yeah, I have to jump in on the EBITDA train because I talk a lot about EBITDA.
Okay.
And I think that the C-suite is not giving marketers the credit that they deserve, because most directors of marketing in today's world that I meet really do understand EBITDA. And they know they need to use that language. And it has gotten them into the C-suite, which I think is your point, is, you also have to learn to use that language and figure out the way that you can tie the marketing language to the corporate language and the things that are important to the C-suite. And I think that is how we bridge that gap and get buy-in. I think using some of that language does bridge that gap. I always tell a story. I was on a bus going up to DC with a group that's in the defense space, and I was talking about EBITDA kind of off to the side to someone, and impact on EBITDA by branding and marketing. And a woman who's a CEO specifically like leaned across the aisle to me and said, "What did you say that you do for a living?" And I said, I run a branding and marketing agency." And she said, "And you just used the word EBITDA. Like, I would have never expected that out of a creative type of person." And I just don't think we're given that credit. I mean, you obviously know what it is. You know how to speak to EBITDA. I know how to speak to EBITDA. Many of the marketing directors that I work with do. Um, but it's not all, we're not respected that we do know that, which I do find very interesting. I think we're all challenged by that daily with our clients. But I do think we need to let them know that we understand when they use words like that, that we're,
I think we also
in the
need to use finance-derived terminology in the ways that finance talk about them, right?
right.
The way that most marketers define ROI has got nothing to do with what somebody in finance
I
or
know.
economics thinks of ROI. Okay,
I totally agree.
I think if you look at marketing in marketing 101, right, is adapting your language to your target audience, and yet we're falling at that first fence because we're not adapting the language. EBITDA is
Agree.
one thing, but it's framing our communication in a way that's most receptive to our target audience. Okay, it's a bit like some of the medical professions have issue with the placebo effect. Okay, I mean, it's not that doctors don't believe that the placebo effect works, because clearly there's plenty of authoritative evidence that shows it does. Okay. What upsets them is that they don't know why it works. They've no idea how it works, right? And I think in the same way, finance has an ingrained discomfort with marketing, not because they don't think it brings results, but because they can't make a pivot table out of it. Okay?
Right.
So I think the underlying issue is partly one of language, yes. But I think the bigger issue is for marketers to have a better understanding of the finance world in general. Okay? They need to recognize how marketing's thought processes and measurements are different to how finance people understand the business. And I think they need to be aware of the need to reframe the information that we're giving and the reporting that we're sending to be more attuned and receptive to a finance-centric mindset. And I don't think we're doing that. We're jumping up and down about ebook downloads or podcast views or videos or how many likes and comments and retweets and this sort of stuff. But that's all great. It's all wonderful. But we need to translate that into attributed sales.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the CFO is going, "Oh, great! You've got all of these ebook downloads, and we've got all of this traffic. It's wonderful." But what does that mean? Okay,
Yeah.
What they're looking for is, how do we translate all of this stuff into stuff that rocks their world, which is cash flow, right? Yeah, they're happy with all the traffic and visibility, but from where they're sitting, there doesn't seem to be anything tangible. Right? So what we forgot to do when we're talking about this is, like I said, know your audience, right? So we want to hear something, we want to communicate something along the lines of maybe, based upon our experience with similar programs that we've done in the past, we can confidently conclude that if the business spends X amount of dollars on this particular marketing initiative, we can increase revenue by this % over the course of this time frame,
Right.
when compared with the status quo, because that part is absolutely vital, right? What is the consequence of doing nothing? would we have got those sales anyway? Or is it as a direct result of what we've done? And we're not that sort of stuff. I don't think we're doing as an industry. And if we were, we wouldn't have. I read out HBR survey about 3 or 4 months ago, beginning of the year, I think it was, and like 80% of CEOs are unhappy with their CMO. Why is the average tenure of a CMO like 14 months? Because we don't talk board.
Right.
Because we're not adapting our language in ways that make sense to an economist, to a finance person.
So the
So
lesson
we
here,
are
we got
our own worst enemies.
we got to teach
if you
the
like.
communicators how to communicate with their target market to get what they need. Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it scary? Isn't it? Is absolutely ridiculous? You know,
And-
do as I say, not as I do. It's like the shoemaker's kids. We've got, it's the whole thing, right? Do as I say, not as I do.
So Hannah, are you learning anything
Yeah.
from this as a account manager type of
Yeah,
role
no,
that you're in?
It's funny, and I feel like this idea comes to me a lot when we start to end all of the podcast of just your customers buy with emotion, but your budget comes from logic. And just how do you explain to someone that while you're excited about your idea, on one hand, you can't speak so excitedly to the people that need to fund it. And you've said it really good, G, about just how to do that. So we really had to put a focus on it. But I thought that this whole interview was a really strong reminder that we've gotten so caught up in the science of marketing that we've forgotten that people buy emotionally, not rationally. And we all know that, I think, if you really sat down and think about it. So it doesn't matter how data-driven or efficient your marketing is if it doesn't make someone feel something. So it was a really nice reminder to think about that shift, moving away from purely pragmatic, tech-driven marketing and bringing humanity and emotion back into what we're doing. So, and it can open up opportunities that we didn't know existed, channels that we might not have even been considering, even though they exist there. So like you said from your story of the mailbox company, so switching from direct to or digital to direct mail, this wasn't just a tactical shift. You had explained that it was emotional to the target audience. It landed differently and it worked. I think you said that there was a 34% uplift in the first run. And that's the Hummingbird effect. It's a small change from their digital to direct mailing, but it had a huge effect. So it's a great reminder for anyone listening that if your marketing is feeling flat or you're just blending in or nothing's really working, it's maybe time to stop optimizing for the algorithms or the science and really focus on your customer. A great reminder. I learned a lot. I have a lot of questions about all of this, but
you can learn more about neuroscience from Gee
and
for
you
hours
really
and
do.
hours.
You stop and you start remembering, you're like, oh yeah, I did learn that in science class or psychology or those things. But it's the opposite whenever you get in that weird middle place of who do I need to be speaking to. So it was a really good reminder to remember, when you're talking to your customers, talk to your customers. When you're talking to your bosses, speak their language and be effective to get what you need.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Gee, I really appreciate your time today. We've learned so much. Do you have a final thought to share with us?
Wow, I think Hannah knocked it, said it very eloquently, and you mentioned it earlier on, Wendy. We don't talk to customers enough. Customers will tell us what we need to do, how we need to do it, if we let them. But too many of us don't speak with customers enough. Okay, we're too busy trying to game the system. Hannah, you mentioned about trying to figure out the algorithms and stuff. Okay, it's not about how does Instagram work? How does the LinkedIn algorithm work? How does TikTok work? It's about how does the customer work? How does the human mind work? How do we need to frame our value articulation in a way that will resonate in the minds of our ideal customer profile. And we find that out, number one, by speaking to the people who've bought from us, who've put their hands in their pockets and shelled out their hard-earned cash to buy from us, because they want us to succeed. They want to help us. They are our biggest advocates, right? They will bend over backwards to help us. But for some reason, and when I say speak, I mean pick up the phone
Right.
and speak, or Zoom or something. I don't mean some friggin' survey or an email exchange, right?
Right.
Okay? It's human to human. It's none of this, oh, but I emailed them, they haven't come back to me. Yeah, okay, and what? They don't have a phone?
Well,
What?
and Gee, we see when clients email, like, let's ask them to email us a testimonial. Well, if you
Right.
talk to them on the phone, they say completely different words than what they typed up or what AI typed up for them, as they
Exactly.
went through
When
radio.
we do
different.
customer interviews, customer testimonials, right? They say, can you send the questions in advance? I'll say, not only will you not get them, but 50% of the questions aren't on that list because I don't know where the conversation's going
Right.
to go.
Right. Absolutely.
And it has to be like that because not only does that help you in terms of messaging, but it helps you in SEO because that's the stuff that they're searching for,
Right.
those words. So we know all of this stuff, right? AI can't help you do that. You have to have somebody who has experience, taste, and judgment to work that stuff out to be able to then put it into whatever you want to put it into. But we're not doing that. And then we're looking around and saying, why is our marketing not working? Right? The reason your marketing is not working is not because marketing doesn't work. It means you suck at marketing. That's what it means.
Well, and I love that we're ending today's conversation on the vocabulary and voice of the customer because it's something that we truly believe in. We're definitely on the same page of that, G. And it's just great that your entire conversation with us has led us there. And I think that's a great note to kind of leave all of you listeners with. We're so thankful that you listen to the podcast. And I think the voice of the customer is the great message here at the end of this podcast for you to take forward and help you find your hummingbird effect. Thank you so much. And Gee, we really appreciate it. Can you quickly share with us your contact information, how to find you online?
Best way to get hold of me, Wendy, is on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time. Would you believe there's only one Gee Ranasinha on LinkedIn?
I bet.
Who'da thunk?
Bet.
Right? Amazing.
That's
So
great.
find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Otherwise, Kexino, KEXINO.com. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to The Hummingbird Effect with Wendy Coulter. We hope you found this episode valuable. Please be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more or to work with Wendy and her team, go to hummingbird-creative.com.